next up is the trailer that I mentioned earlier of there is going to be a fan base for this. And I think that is super, super awesome. If you're in that fan base, I'm super happy for you. This is just not for me. But let's talk about it nonetheless because it seems to be the big trailer that we got this week from the Marvel camp. And that is
Hmm.
The Marvels dropping their first trailer. And it's hard not to go into this trailer with a bias just because everyone has their own preconceived notions going into it. Um,
Yeah.
I did not like Captain Marvel. I think it's one of the weakest MCU movies. I also think Brie Larson was really miscast just because her portrayal of the character kind of goes against the script that they're trying to portray of just
Yeah.
like keep your emotions in check, don't do this, that, or the other thing. But she doesn't really emote in the movie, and also just she comes across kind of cold and jaded.
Yeah.
Which if the character was written that way, okay, cool. But she comes across not very likable, despite the fact that it's written to be a likable character, and also
Yeah.
she has too much similarities with Iron Man. Of just I'm not the biggest fan of cocky characters, and it's not just the obvious thing with Brie Larson. It's I didn't like Iron Man 2. I've stood on my hill, and I will die on the hill. I will die on this horse. That I can't stand Iron Man as a character, but I get that I'm not supposed to like him. I think whatever. Getting back to this trailer though, this sounds mean, but it's one of those times that's just going, oh, cool. It's a Marvel movie I can skip. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. Just like at times with all the shows, with all the movies, it just feels a little overwhelming of like, can I take a break? And I feel like it sounds mean, but I feel like this is the break movie. I don't see anything big or significant happening in this movie. I'm just probably going to skip this one, guys. I feel bad, but at the same time, I don't because you're only as good as your last movie in your franchise. And I think a big part of the reason why this movie is called The Marvels is because they know the backlash that they got for the last one with Captain Marvel and Brie Larson. It's why I think it was very intentional that of the three main characters in this movie, she gets the least amount of screen time in this trailer. They show her the least. Granted, her character seems to be acting different just by the trailer alone, but I have other thoughts, but I'll hand it over to Josh. I'm just in the state of Marvel right now. I'm just burnt out, and I think this is the one where I sit on the bench for a little bit. Don't worry, I'm used to that. I'm used to sitting on the bench, but for this, I'll wait till Disney Plus. I think, like I did with Eternals.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna be in the same boat. I was not necessarily that interested in in this movie. I have never been that big of a Brie Larson Marvel fan. Really, any of a fan of any of these, and of course, because of how it works with Disney, this is going to feel like the one that everyone can skip, but much like Miss Marvel, this will be the one that no one can skip.
Yep, Miss Marvel introduced not X-Men, but mutants
Mutants,
essentially.
and it was like,
And we'll talk about her show in a little bit here.
I it's cool, I guess. I don't necessarily understand how their power. I understand how Captain Marvel and oh geez, what's her name?
Monica?
Yeah, how and Monica, how their powers are connected. That makes sense to me, but I'm not. It's especially if Miss Marvel is a mutant. How can her powers be connected? It just I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. I am not particularly excited. It doesn't really make sense again why Samuel Jackson's Nick Fury is out in space. They don't explain it, but he's just there.
Wasn't he just back
Cool.
on Earth for Secret Invasion?
Like what is happening? I'm so confused, and I'm really not. I'm not a fan of it. I'm just not, and
Again,
I wish I was.
like Rey with Star Wars, there's a large group of young women growing up with this character that now have a hero to look up to and idolize. I think that's super cool. I know there's a bunch of girls that look up to Brie Larson's Captain Marvel or Iman Vellani's Kamala Khan.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That is super cool. And I'm super happy that you guys can experience these comic book characters. Welcome to a potentially toxic world of comic book fandom, but I, for one, welcome more people into the fandom. I don't ever want to kick people out because they like something that I don't like. So if you are excited for this movie, that is awesome. I'm super excited for you. I've just have never been excited for this. And I'm very interested to see the box office for this movie for a variety of reasons. One, MCU box office has not been as strong. We saw Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania essentially just crater. Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness had a huge opening weekend and then kind of leveled off. It still made a very good profit. The first Captain Marvel made over $1 billion. But I attribute a lot of that to it was the movie right before Endgame, and they marketed the movie as you must see this movie before Endgame, whereas I don't think it was required viewing. It gives you some backstory on Carol, but Carol ultimately didn't factor into Endgame a ton. Like, once they actually go on the time heist, she just disappears for a while. She's not very relevant because they realize she might be too powerful because she can gotta fix everything by herself. I don't know if it'll still have the same box office success. It's been 4 years since that first one. I think fan sentiment was never positive to begin with, at least from the toxic side of fandom, and I think that's only grown over time. It's kind of come in waves. But here's an interesting point that I don't see people talking about that I think absolutely could affect this movie's box office. This features 3 people in the title role. Like, we're going to split time evenly between Brie Larson, Iman Vellani, and Monica Rambeau's characters, I believe. 2 out of the 3 of those characters have never been seen in a movie before and were introduced in a Disney Plus show. Now, I know a lot of people liked Miss Marvel, but it had historically low viewership numbers. So I think you're going to run into the problem of Marvel might have expected Miss Marvel to do a lot better streaming-wise than it did because she's such an integral part of this movie and no one saw her show. Now, more people might be familiar with Monica because she was on WandaVision, but WandaVision was quite a few years ago now at this point, too. So people are familiar with Captain Marvel because we've seen her in her own movie. We saw her in Endgame. You're now introducing 2 other characters that have this big, rich backstory, but a lot of people that don't have Disney Plus might be lost. So we're going to run into the issue that we've been having with like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Loki, Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, of like other things are required viewing. And I think that might ultimately hurt the box office here because I heard wonderful things about Miss Marvel. Heather watched a couple episodes. She said it was fine. I didn't watch it just because I didn't figure that I was the target demographic, kind of like CW's Supergirl. Like, not for me, but the people that it is made for, I hope you enjoy it. I really, really do. I think the same thing with Miss Marvel. I also don't see how this factors into the larger picture here, because the larger MCU picture just seems like it's going every which way without a clear direction, and that's just annoying.
Which is exactly why this is going to be the one that defines the direction that it's going.
Of course.
I never really had much desire to watch the show. Maybe I'll go check it out. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm kind of concerned because I don't want, no matter what happens, I don't want this movie to bomb and then Marvel look at that and go, okay, cool. So we're just not going to do diverse characters then. Because I can totally see like the studio being like, well, that's the reason it failed. And I was like,
they definitely would have if
really?
Perlmutter was still here.
Yes. So we'll see what happens. Technically, this is just a teaser. So I guess we're waiting for the first full trailer. I guess we'll find out what happens.